Alright, so there's been a while since my last video. Sorry about that. I have other things to do, it appears. But now that I've done a few of those things, I can get back to this tour through the Spacemacs alphabet. And if I'm not mistaken, according to my notes, which I keep here on my left-hand side, today we are going to talk about errors under space E. So all of that is basically subject to enabling the syntax checking layer. Um, I keep syntax checking enabled by default to off, which means I have to explicitly turn it on, and I do that using the space TS key binding. So now you can see that I have 37 warnings in this file, as you can see in the mode line. There are no errors because I keep my dot file pretty good, I guess. But there's basically no way to avoid getting warnings in Emacs Lisp. At least not if you have macros like I do here. Um, so let's see then what we find under space E. First of all, there's a space EC binding, which I don't think is in Spacemacs by default. I have added it myself. Let me see uh, here. Flycheck clear. So if you do hit that, it clears away all the warnings until you save the file. Or let's see, let me make a change and then save it. Yeah, and then it runs the checking again. There you go. So I'm not gonna write that down because it's not in Spacemacs. Maybe it should be. But if you want, you can make a pull request then for that. What else do we have here? Space EH, fly check, describe checker. Okay, so these are all the syntax checkers in Flycheck. Flycheck, by the way, is the package that provides syntax checking in Spacemacs. So let's see here, Emacs Lisp, Emacs Lisp, Emacs Lisp checks syntax and so and so and so. It runs checkdoc afterwards. It executes Emacs and so on. Let me see, space EH, Emacs Lisp checkdoc. Yeah, same thing. So you can see some information here about the syntax checkers and which binaries they use. So I think that's useful. Let's put that in space EC, sorry, space EH, describe syntax checkers. Space L pops up a window with a list of all the errors and warnings in the current file. And it doesn't select the window by default, which I always thought was a little bit funny, but let's go down there. And if you now scroll through here using J, you can see that the file buffer updates and jumps to the correct location. And I think you can use Enter, yeah, to jump to the buffer with the actual error in it. And if I do space EL, sorry, space EL, it'll hide that one now. Okay, so it's actually a toggle. Okay, nice. Toggle error list buffer. Although it would be nice if it actually selected that window, I think. But okay, that's fine. Space N, that goes to the next error. Space E capital N goes to the previous one, and so does space EP, I think. Yep. So N and P. let's see, how do I phrase this? Jump between errors. By the way, if you enable the unimpaired layer, unimpaired there, you get these nice key bindings on the square bracket keys. So if I do left bracket L, that is also previous error, and forward bracket L is the next error. So I tend to prefer those. Let me see here. Consider using these from the unimpaired layer. Is there anything else we have here? N and P, we've seen those. S, yeah, select checker. So sometimes, well, hopefully not too often, but sometimes Flycheck will choose the wrong checker and you have to change it. And you can use space ES to do that. In addition, if you do space E capital S, you can select the checker as well as the binary. So if I do Emacs Lisp here, and then it will ask me for the Emacs executable. But I don't need to do that right now. Typically, or hopefully, you shouldn't ever have to use those functions because that should really just work automatically. But it's nice to know that they're there, I guess. S and capital S select checker and executable. Okay, space E V verify setup. This is a really useful function. Flycheck is a pretty complicated package that depends on a lot of external tools because it doesn't really know how to do syntax checking by itself. It always relies on external tools, and configuring this can be slightly painful. So this is a really nice option uh, to check which checkers are configured for your current buffer, whether they are working, whether that executable can be found, and so on. Um, so this is really good to keep in mind if you ever get into trouble with Flycheck. Verify Flycheck setup. Okay, so that I think brought us to the end of the errors. So that gives us plenty of time to keep going. Let me just turn off Flycheck here. And then on space F, I should note though that we skipped space D because I don't have the layer that uses that key binding. It's typically used by dash and zeal, I think, in the dash layer. Um, it's here, dash, which sounds like a great idea, and it's a feature that I am going to have a look at later on. But for now, I haven't used it, and I don't want my first impression with the new features to be on camera. So that's why I'm skipping D. On the other hand, moving on, we have space F, which is for files, and there's a lot of things in here. So let's see what do we have. Files. Space FA. So there's a layer called FASD, fast, which is a really nice way to find files and folders that you use a lot, but which are for whatever reason not accessible via projectile or whatever other function you like to use. So the way it works is this. Let me bring up the little README. There is a tool, an external tool called Fast, which you have to install. And when you install it and you enter it into your or you have to source the FAST script in your shell dot profile or dot bash rc or equivalent, and it keeps a database of the folders and files that you use the most. So if I bring up now a terminal, can I zoom a little bit? Okay. So if I bring up now a terminal and I do d Emacs, it lists all the folders that I use the most, which has Emacs in the name. And if I do finit, it will list the files. And it also, you can use it like this. It sort of knows in intelligently that it's being used in a shell expansion form like this with backticks, and then it just prints just the path. So there you go. It brings you there immediately. And the fast package in Emacs has a great integration with this. If you can do space FAF to search for files, and if I now write init, I get there to that file immediately because there was only one file that matched it. But if I do space faf.el, I get a bunch of Emacs Lisp files. And since there's more than one that matches, I get this Helm buffer. And I can do space FAD to search for folders. And I believe now if I hit enter on one, I'd get Ranger. Exactly. Or Dired if you're using or if you're not a user of the Ranger layer. And I can do space FAS to search for both files and folders at the same time. There you go. Here I have a folder here and I have a file there. So this is just really, really cool. Especially if you use the terminal a lot. This brings really the whole thing together in a really nice manner. And it's really, really smart at picking out those folders and files that you use a lot. So let me do here D directories, F files, S files and directories. Okay, so space F C copy file, readme org back. Okay, so this saves the buffer under a new file name, and it also switches the visited file name of the buffer. So if you do now space fs to save, it will save to that new file name. And I also noticed that it changed the read-only status of this buffer. And I don't think I have the previous buffer is now not there. Or I mean, in other words, there's no buffer visiting the old file name. So let me delete that. Yes. Yes. Okay. C write buffer to new file name. And let me point out S in the meantime here. Write buffer to file, or save, as it's also called. So let's not do everything always alphabetically. Space F, capital C for convert, and here I have D for Unix to DOS and U for DOS to Unix. So this is for converting line endings. Let's see, D Unix to DOS. C U DOS to Unix. I'm curious to why there's no Macintosh in there, but okay. Convert file or line endings. D to DOS. Let's do that. U to Unix. Okay. Space F, capital D, delete current buffer file. Um, Let me try that over here. Space F, capital D. Are you sure you want to delete this file? No. Okay, so it does prompt. That's good. D delete buffer and file. So I could have done that previously with my readme.org.back. Wish I had learned that sooner. Space FE. Let's do that later. Space FF. This is the quintessential binding in Spacemacs for finding files. It opens a Helm session where, to the dismay of many Vim users, you can only see the files in one folder at a time. So if I go to my emacs.d folder, it does not show every single file in every single subfolder. It just shows the files and folders in emacs.d. So I have to actually navigate the tree using this. Like in other Helm's buffers, you can use Ctrl J and Ctrl K to move up and down. You can use Ctrl L to move into a folder and Ctrl H to move up. At least if you haven't um, hacked it like I have. I guess that hack has some faults about it. But anyway, that's how it works. If you press Ctrl Z, you can see all the different things you can do here, and there are a lot. For example, you saw me just previously delete a file with this interface by doing Control Space to mark them, and then Alt capital D, delete files. No. So there's really a lot of things you can do in there. It's a pretty powerful and general interface to a lot of different features. So find file. If you have um, if you have IDO switched on, let me turn off this feature here so you can see the full names. If you have IDO switched on, you will get IDO instead of Helm here, which some people like, but is slightly less powerful, I imagine, in terms of features. Okay, let's keep going. Space F, capital F, Helm find files as well. Okay, seems like the same binding. I wonder. Helm, let me see. Helm, where are you? Is this binding anywhere here? Let's see what's up with this. So FF goes to Spacemacs Helm find files, and capital F goes to Helm find files. And if I go to this function, let me see if I can find it. It's a custom Spacemacs implementation for calling Helm find files. Okay, it removes the automatic guessing of the initial value. Ah, okay. So if I do let me see. So if I write readme.md here, and if I do space ff, it will not select readme.md. It will not take a clue from the fact that my cursor is on a file name. But if I do space F, capital F, yeah, it fills in the prompt with that name, right? Okay. Nice to know. Find files, F, find files, look at point for initial guess. Okay, nice. Space F, G, rgrep. Search for Spacemacs. In files. Ah, okay. Yeah, all Emacs Lisp files. In base directory Emacs D. Oh, yikes. Okay, so this is a sort of more general version of projectile search. Typically, when you want to do something like this, you want to use projectile and Helm AG, which are functions that we will get to if you keep watching these videos. But if you want to search just through arbitrary files with arbitrary, I mean, with so and so file extensions and in so and so folders, even folders that are not projects, then I guess you can use this. Um, yeah, G grep. Okay, space F J direct jump. Okay, so again it opens in Ranger since that's my I've configured Ranger so that it replaces the red in every case. I'm wondering what that is though. Um, runs the command direct jump. Jump to direct buffer corresponding to current buffer. If in a file, direct the current directory and move to the files line. If already in direct, move pop up a level. Okay. So, but if you use Ranger, then it does not jump to that files line. Okay. That's probably a feature request for Ranger. Sounds like an interesting binding. If you do space AD, it opens the red. But space FJ is supposed to open the red and move the wait. Space AD. It does move to that file. Nice. So if I move it off now to assets and I do space FJ, it does move to init.l. Okay, I didn't see that to begin with. Or maybe I was blind. Great. Yeah, so as I was saying, space AD just opens to red, but it doesn't move the point to the relevant file that you came from. But if you do space FJ, it does. Open the red and move point to given file. Great. We're learning lots of new things here. Space F capital J, open junk file. So this is a relatively new binding that I've found myself using a lot, especially since I have to reproduce bugs that people report to Spacemacs a lot, and they typically involve programming languages that I don't typically use a lot, like JavaScript and Ruby and you name it. So previously I had populated my entire home folder full of test.js, test.rb, test.html, test whatever. But now there's this space F capital J binding where you're basically prompted to open a file in the junk folder, which is hidden in the Emacsd cache, way out of sight, which is great. There's actually a pull request open right now to improve the initial file name here based on the date, which I probably will merge. So this binding will become even more useful. Um, so yeah, this is basically become one of my most favorite bindings. Um, very quickly, open junk file. Space F L find file literally. So when you open a file in Spacemacs, it turns on a whole bunch of modes. I mean, it opens the major mode for that file type, and this major mode will trigger a whole bunch of minor modes. I mean, you can run describe mode here to see all the features that are currently loaded for this buffer alone. So there's a lot of different things, and some of these modes have performance problems. Um, Particularly, a famous one is this um, a smart parents feature, where if you highlight, uh, if you're on a parenthesis, it will highlight the matching parentheses. And if you happen to have a very large file with two parentheses which are very far from each other, and you happen to accidentally move your point over one of them, it will take forever to find the matching one. So in, when you open large files like that, typically you want to do it literally, which means it just opens the file without any bells and whistles. There is no major mode, there is no syntax highlighting, no minor modes are enabled, etc. Um, which is good because typically when you open files of that size, they aren't source code files. They are just data files that you want to have a look at or whatever. Um, and actually, there is a pull request open right now to introduce a prompt, an automatic prompt, so that whenever you open a file that is over a certain size limit, it will prompt you whether or not you want to do it literally. Um, so I imagine that will also be merged quite soon. But in the meantime, you can use this spacefl binding. So open file literally. It works basically exactly the same as spaceff, by the way. Spacefl. So this is Helm locate. If you have locate installed on your system, or if you're using OS X and you have mdefined, um, it's a really nice way to find files over the entire hard disk. Um, And when I say the entire hard disk, I really mean the entire hard disk. As you can see now, I wrote Spacemacs here, and it's still finding files, some of which really have um, nothing to do with Spacemacs at all. And yeah, the sorting here is under any form of critique, I think. Um, but there are some features here that lets you search for just the base name, I think. Yeah, so if you do -b, it will search on just the base name, which makes it immediately a lot more useful. And there's a few other things. You need to read the docstring. I think I don't have them all on the tip of my tongue right here. Um, but you need locate installed, and you need to have a locate database. So look it up in your distro how you do that. L Helm locate. It's a nice binding. Space F. Oh, open an external app. So will I now be? Did something happen? Oh, there you go. That's get it. Okay. Well, I can't see myself using this a lot, but it's nice to know it's there. I was not queried for which app to use, so I guess it looks it up using a however feature that the operating system uses to decide these kind of things. So open in external app. What if I do that from dired? Space F O. Will I get a folder? Oh, really? Really? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it opened the file I'm on. It didn't open the folder. Great. Great, great, great. Though I imagine Ranger has some kind of feature on its own for this. But okay. Nice. Space F R. Let me have a drink of water. So spacefr recent files. This is a list of all the or your recent files. Even though Helm only shows 100 by default, the limit here was recently up to 1000, I think. So if yeah, so there's really more than 100. So if you just types anything at all, um, you can access any part of the list. Quite useful, even though I should note that space BB Helm Mini also has a list of recent files here. So this basically I typically use space BB for this, so I don't reach for space FR very much. But it's there anyway. Recent files. Space F capital R rename current buffer file. So if I do that here, new name Intel back rename to Initelback. Okay, so actually that changes the name. It is different from space FC in that it actually removes the old name here. So space F capital R, and let's move it back. And okay, this is a hint that I should point out. If you want to write a new file name in a Helm buffer like this, and you find, and now I want to write init.el, right? But you can see that it has suggested to me init.l.bug because that is an existing file name. How do you write a new file name, a brand new one, if it always suggests an existing one? If I type enter now, I will get init.l.bug. Yeah, it already exists. Rename to it anyway. No. So how do you do that? Well, you see this top line here, which has a question mark in front of it. That contains exactly the string you wrote. So if you wanna get exactly what you wrote without bothering about any suggestions from Helm, you should pick that one. And let me hit enter, and there you go, rename to Initel. So this also applies if you go to space FF and you want to make a new file. Let me make a new file called ini, right? Now it suggests me to make a new to open a file called init.l, but if I want to actually make a new file called ini, I can explicitly select the top line here, and file does not exist. Create buffer, yes, and there you go. You have your new file and new buffer. And I don't want that now, so I will use my newly learned binding space F capital D and delete that. Okay. Where was I? Space F, capital R, yes. Let me see. Capital R, rename file. Okay, space F S, write file. We already did that one. Space F capital S, write all. So that saves all the buffers, I suppose. Write all buffers to file. Space F neo tree. Okay, so if you come from Vim and you're in love with nerd tree, we have neo tree here, which is basically more or less more or less on feature parity with nerd tree, I think. Um, I see it has a slightly ugly mode line. I guess I'll have to fix that up. Um, but yeah, so this is there if you're one of those people who like folder trees on the side of your Emacs. I'm not one of those people. I almost never use this. I have no idea which key bindings work in here. So if you want to find that out, you have to do space question mark, which I already told you about, I think. Or go to the Spacemacs documentation right there. search for neotree and read the documentation here for key bindings. I can't help you there. But anyway, if you do space ft, you will get there. So space f v prefix. What do we have here? Ah, yes. Okay, this is a nice one. V variables. So, how do I explain this? Well, Emacs has a lot of variables that configure certain things about how it works. Many of them are buffer local, which means they can have different values in different buffers. And often you want to set them automatically for certain files, or for certain files in a buffer. Certain files in a directory or whatever. To facilitate this, Emacs has a feature called directory local files, directory variables and file local variables. And you can write this in the header of your file, or in a file called dirlocals.el. And the format of particularly the latter is slightly arcane, which is why we have these helping functions. So let's try this now. Space f v f, add file local variable. So then I have to type in a variable that I want to be file local for this file, and I'll just pick whatever, vc display status, and it should have the value true, right? And if I now do enter, you see you get this thing on the end of your file, local variables, vc display status. So let me have a look here. vc display status is t. It's true also there. So let me set this to nil. Now I have a file local variable of vc display status, which is nil. And let me delete this buffer and open that file again. And then it says the local variables in initl contains values that may not be safe. Do you want to apply it? Type yn or exclamation point, which either sets them or doesn't set them, and lastly, it sets them and marks them as safe, so that you will not get this prompt later. So let me type y, and if I now check the value of vc display status, it is nil, and the original value was t, and you can say that it says it's local in this buffer, and the global value is t, and it's marked as file local. Great. So this is one way that you can use file local variables. Typically, you might not want to do it this way, because it'll sort of pollute your files with comments like this, and your colleagues who don't use Emacs, they are not going to like that. So typically, you want to do this with directory local variables. So let's try that. Let me remove this, and let me do space fvd for directory local variable. Now, directory local variables are somewhat more complicated. They apply to modes or to files or subdirectories. So let me do Emacs list mode vc display status nil. Okay, now here I have a new file called dirlocals.el, which I can save. It has been added to, let me see, my emacsd folder, which is the same folder as the file I was in previously, my initl. And this arcane incantation right here basically says that in all files under this folder recursively, which open in Emacs list mode, the vc display status variable should be set to nil. So let me delete this and open it again. And again, I get the same question. Do I want to apply these variables? Yes, I do. Um, so this time you see that my initl file has not been polluted with any comments, and all it's contained here. And this file I can add to git ignore or whatever, so that it's just mine, and only I have to bother with it. Typically, this is what you want to do, and typically I don't want to bother with messing around with this file format in here, so I use space fdv, space fvd to add these variables. Um, I should note though that in here, s space fvd, you can apply to modes, but you can also make them apply to subdirectories. So if I want to have a variable that only applies to a certain subdirectory called layers, I'm not sure I need the trailing slash here. Let me do vc display status nil, and oh, I get a string with a face, or a text property here. I doubt that is intended, but let me delete that. So this is what it's supposed to look like, and let me delete this as well, like that. Okay. So now, as you can see, it only applies in a subdirectory. So if I now open initl once more, I am not asked about this variable. But if I open a file in layers, for example, this one, I am also not asked about it. Does it have to be like right in that folder? I'm also not asked about it here. Okay, that's kind of curious. I'm not sure why. Maybe I have to remove the trailing slash. Um, that also didn't work. Okay, well, not sure why that doesn't work. Let me let me try here. Info. Actually, let me not try. Okay, I'll figure this out later, and so will you. Let me delete that actually. I forgot. Their locals. Delete. Okay. Yes. Okay. After that slight digression, directory, local variable, file, local variable, like that. But there was one more there. Add file, local variable, prop line. Oh, okay. That's a different format for file local variables. So fvp vc display status nil. Okay, and then you get this incantation here at the first line. So this is another format basically for file local variables. And in fact, if you open your dot file, the templates, core templates. I can't even write templates. Dot file, you will see that you have a file local variable right there, mode emacslisp. So this file, whatever its name, whatever its extension, will open in emacslisp mode. So that's one use of file local variables. Basically, I can just say if you don't find a use for them now, you'll know it when you do. If you have a variable that for whatever reason you need to set, and for whatever reason it has to have a different value in some kind of file or specific folders, use this. Add file local variable, alternative format. Um, as you can see, or as you saw, it will query for whether or not you want to apply these variables whenever you open the file. Um, and you can avoid that by configuring the safe local variable. Um, let me see. Let me see. There's a way to configure. Yeah. So you want to put, or you want to configure the safe local variable property of the variable you're interested in, and the value of that property should be a function that decides whether or not a value is safe. So for example, here I have configured to say that helm make build dir is a safe file or directory local variable if it is a string, um, which is not totally 100% kosher, because a malicious attacker could basically choose to set this to some folder where there's a make file that does evil things, right? But I'm trusty like that. So if you want to avoid being prompted about this all the time, you can configure this on a variable level. It's kind of difficult to do. Um, it's awkward and takes time and so on. Um, which is why you had this prompt that gave you an option to permanently mark values as safe. Um, and if you do that, they will be added here as part of the customize feature of Emacs, which looks ugly. And so that's why I prefer to do it the manual way, like this. And I guess it helps that there's only really one local variable that I've been interested in so far, namely this one. But enough about that. I spent way too much time talking about this, I think. But now you know. Okay, space F Y, show and copy buffer file name. Okay, so that shows us the file name and it copies it, I guess. So if I now paste, yeah, it goes in there, and I guess it's also in the... Nope, it's not in the system clipboard, but it is in the internal Emacs clipboard, or the kill ring as it's called. So Y, show and copy file name. Great, that brings us almost to the end of space F, with the exception of space FE, where you find a bunch of Emacs related bindings, and also some Spacemacs things, which curiously aren't about files at all. So Emacs configuration related stuff. So basically, if you want to help work on Spacemacs, there are some bindings in here that you should know. So let me have a look at them. Space FED find dot file. That will bring you immediately to your Spacemacs dot file from wherever. Very great binding, especially if you're a habitual hacker and who likes to tweak things like I am. Go to dot file. Go to Spacemacs dot file, I should say. Space FE capital D. This opens an ediff session between your dot file on the left and the template dot file on the right. This is useful because sometimes we add new dot file variables, or we change the names of some functions or whatever, and this is useful to stay up to date. As it happens, I don't know how to use ediff, and I have heavily changed some things in my dot file, like I removed all the comments. So this isn't really that useful for me. Typically, I like to stay up to date just by reading the commits, and I see whether I need to change anything in my dot file that way. But if you're not as anxiously up to date as I am, this is a nice way to do it. You have to learn edif though, which I don't know. So let me quit this um, and go back here. Capital D, edif um, uh, dot file changes. Maybe we can write it like that. Okay. Um, space F E F. That opens the frequently asked questions. This is a new feature that you don't find in the released version of Spacemacs yet, but it'll be there in the 0105 version, and it is currently available in develop. Um, and I imagine this will be nice once we get some questions in here. So you can do enter on one that will bring you right to the entry in the frequently asked questions file. Thank you, Streaky Cobra, for this very nice feature. Spacemacs FAQ Helm source. Let's put it like that. Space FE. Let me do I first. This brings you to the init file, which is the entry point for Emacs when it starts up. There's not a whole lot of things that going on in here. So this file is not very useful on its own, but I use it as a very quick way to bring me to my emacs.d project. So from here on, I can do space / I can do space gs for my git status, and so on. I space max init file space fe capital R. So whenever you make changes to your dot file, you can do space fe capital R to synchronize. That basically tries to mimic the behavior as if you were to restart Emacs. Now, as it happens, this isn't really perfect. There's no way to really perfectly restart Emacs without actually restarting Emacs. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. But for minor changes or just adding a single layer or something like that, um, uh, this might work. Space FE V display and copy version. So that shows the Spacemacs version and copies it to the kill ring. Okay. Not not super useful, but show and copy Spacemacs version. Okay. And that brings me to the final key binding I want to show today. The star of them all, space FEH. So this is basically your guide to Spacemacs. If I had a penny for every time someone on the Spacemacs chat room asked us a question that could be answered by going in here, I wouldn't have to work for money anymore. This is awesome. And if you're not using it, then you're stupid. So basically what this shows you, first of all, it shows you a list of the documentation files for Spacemacs. There are 7 of them here. The first one is really the most important one, which, by the way, if you haven't read it, you really should. You really should read this. All the key bindings are here. Let me bring up space FEH again. Vim users migration guide. If you come from Vim and you're curious about how you bind keys, what is a major mode, what is a layer, what's a microstate, and whatever, then this is a good file to read. Um, quick start guide. I guess there's something useful in here as well. Space FEH. Tips on writing layers. If you're writing a layer and you're confused, which I totally understand because the layer system is not that easy to understand, uh, this is a nice file for clearing things up. Space FEH. The aforementioned frequently asked questions is here. The Spacemacs conventions, which tells you basically if you want to introduce a new key binding and you want to make a pull request, what should that key binding be to be in line with the rest of Spacemacs, and how to contribute. So these are some of our contribution guidelines. Um, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg. If you go below here, you'll see a list of layers. And you'll see there's a lot of them. And if you click on any of them here, or if you hit enter on any of them, you'll go to the readme of the layer. So basically, whenever you ask yourself, geez, I wonder if Spacemacs supports this or that programming language or has a layer for this and that feature, all you have to do is search here. Go. And there you have it. Spacemacs supports Go. Well, how do I use it? Well, you go enter and you read this document and it tells you how to use it. It's amazing. Amazing. Um, Now, to be fair, some of the layer documentation are pretty sparse, but at least there's no excuse for not checking it. Really, there's no excuse. Um, and under the layers, there's a list of packages. So basically, if you know a package that you're wondering whether Emacs has any support for at all, that's where you want to go. So if I do space FEH and I'm wondering, does Emacs have any support for, let's say, company mode? So let me write company, and here I see it. The company package belongs to the auto completion layer, and if I hit enter now, I go to the function that configures company for the auto completion layer, and if I do go to auto completion here, I can come to the README. So this is yeah. So basically, the list of layers and the list of packages together, they are one very nice list, or a very nice way to get an overview over which things are in Spacemacs. So if that's ever your question, basically, does Spacemacs support X, Y, Z? Search in here, you will have your answer. And if you don't, then you can come ask us. Um, Under the package list, there's a list of all the dot file variables. They are already in your dot file, so you technically don't need this list. But if you hit enter on any of them here, it'll bring you straight to your dot file to that variable. So that is really handy. As well, there's a list of toggles. So Spacemacs basically comes with its own interface for toggling certain features, and here's a list of all of them, and you can toggle them by just hitting enter here. So line numbers. Whoops, there I go. I get line numbers, and I can turn them on by space TN. Sorry, turn them off. I mean. So that's that's basically one interface for this kind of thing. There are quite a few toggles in Spacemacs for features that are sort of or splits the community a little bit, 50-50, like line numbers, like golden ratio mode like this, and so on. So you can discover them there, as well as the frequently asked questions, which you can also access on space FEF as I've already described. Um, so yeah, learn to use this space FEH. It is incredibly useful, and judging from the questions I get on the Spacemax chat room, woefully underused. Um, Spacemax Helm. There you go. So I believe that brings us to the end of this video. I probably rambled on a bit about things that I shouldn't have, like these local variables. But I hope you learned something. I certainly did. Um, and next time I will keep going with um, space H and I and so on. So hopefully that'll bring us to the end before the end of the world. I'll see you later. Thank you.